I'm Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues, and politics, theology, Bible, philosophy, and whatever else comes along in relationship to those issues. Today I'm kind of redoing a video I did very early on in my YouTubing career. So I want to kind of redo this video because for the last week, I have just been inundated with various religious figures on the channel trying to convince me back to faith. And so I realized that not all of them, last time I said I had a challenge for Christians, this time I have a challenge for those of you who believe in God and believe in your religion. Basically put, would you please stop making arguments that I've already heard a million times and they're not convincing to me? I'm going to start off with one big one that happens all the time, and it's called anything based on experientialism. I've had that in a couple forms this week. One was a guy telling me if I had just had a real experience with God, if I had had the real experience with God, I'd still believe. I'm going to be blunt with you. I think that's incredibly arrogant, okay? Number one, it assumes you have had that experience, but you don't know that. If you were to suddenly decide not to be a Christian down the road, then none of your experiences or your encounter with God, or whatever experience you want to call it, would count then, would it? I've had those experiences. I now recognize them for what they are. It's my own highly motivated desires creating my own psychological state that you can do anything with that. This is well documented that euphoric type experiences can lead to religious-like experience that people often interpret it as God. I mean, you're also going to I have to ask the question, how do you know that your encounter with God is the real one and somebody else's encounter with whatever religion that they have is a false one? For instance, the prophet Muhammad went into a cave and had a religious experience where he later created the Quran. If you walked up to him and asked him about that, he would absolutely tell you that it was a true religious experience, and that was what led him to the true faith. I could literally go on with every religion that has some sort of experience. Experience doesn't prove anything. I want to make that abundantly clear. I want to make it astoundingly clear. It doesn't prove anything about whether God is real. It doesn't matter if it's Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, it doesn't matter. Because I will get testimonials all over the place from every religion. The reason I know my religion is true is because of this experience. I had this encounter with God, and that's why I believe it's true. I've had this encounter with God that completely contradicts the other guy's encounter with God, and that's how I know God. My God is true. And on the list goes. Experience doesn't prove anything. It just proves that you believe that you had an experience, or it proves that you believe you had an encounter with God. It doesn't prove that that exists. In order to prove God's existence, it takes a lot more than just touting out your experience. I've had that this week where somebody felt that the mathematical concept of infinity proved God. Then I pointed out a very simple problem. You have the premise God is infinite. Well, a couple things wrong with that. You then say infinity mathematically exists, therefore God. Not trying to be rude, but that's begging the question. But let's go back to that God is infinite statement. By itself, you have to prove that. So there's two things that you have to prove God is infinite is true. You have to, A, prove that there is a God in the first place. You can't use that as a proof of God. That would be begging the question. So you also have to prove that whatever God you can prove exists has the quality of being infinite. Then you can say God is infinite, and then it's a true statement. But by that time, you've already proven that God exists by some other means. It just doesn't work. Your math might be great, but your logic sucks, okay, at that point. And you need to reevaluate that argument because it's really not a good one. I've had, going back to the experience thing, I had a guy post a video of all these women that were switching to Islam as the truth faith, and there were Americans switching to Islam as the truth faith. And it's like, that doesn't prove anything either. Just because you move from one faith to another, that doesn't prove God's existence either. My challenge to the religious community, if you believe in God, I don't care what form of God it takes. I don't care if it's polytheism, monotheism, pantheism, I don't care. Okay, if you want to believe in something spiritual or all this other stuff, once again, my criteria is empirical evidence that can be tested, verified, and repeated that such gods and claims of gods exist. Secondly, the burden of proof is on you. I am not making a claim. I'm just stating the fact that nothing that has been brought to my attention, that the supposed proofs of God, works for me. Okay? I am unconvinced. The only thing I am saying is, based on the evidence presented to me, I am not convinced of God's existence. And I'm going to be blunt with you. Over the last year of running this channel, I have become more and more firm in that. You want to know why? Because the arguments that keep getting brought to me are the same tired old apologetics arguments that I rejected 5 years ago, the same experiential arguments that I rejected 10 years ago when I was still a Christian as proof of God's existence, because I know experience doesn't prove a damn thing. Please, if you're going to make the argument that God exists, actually give me something that I haven't heard. I spent 5 years wrestling with my faith. The first 2 of those years, I spent a lot of time listening to the apologists. And I'm sorry, if you have a basic understanding of basic logic 101, I literally, as a Christian, as a person who is still believing, ripped 99% of those arguments to shreds. The classic arguments for God all had a logical flaw. And just because you put them all together doesn't constitute it. If you put 20 things that are flawed together, you still don't make something that's whole. You got 20 things that are flawed. All the classic arguments of God have a flaw to them. They assume something, they beg the question, they have premises that are unprovable. Most of the arguments for the existence of God, quite frankly, you're trying to prove that which cannot be proven. So if you can't prove it, the default position to me is being an atheist. You haven't convinced me of your claim. I'm free to reject the claim. Okay? You've made an extraordinary claim of some super being's existence. You've given me no evidence. I can dismiss it with no evidence. I don't have to believe it. Okay? So the burden of proof is still on you. And you have to provide something that's empirical, that's testable, and repeatable. Okay? If God is God, to be honest, that should be easy. Well, let's look at the Bible. Okay, I'm an atheist. I don't accept the Bible as God's word. So quoting the Bible verses to me is shit. Okay? I know the Bible. I have a degree in it, and I spent 20 years using it to preach from and teach from regularly. I've read the Holy Bible, all 66 books of the Protestant New and Old Testaments, through from cover to cover at least 10 times in my life. I know the Bible. So quoting the Bible to me like you're going to reveal something to me that I haven't heard is a waste of time. I'm trying to save my time, and I'm trying to save yours. Okay, that's all I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to challenge you in something. If you look up an apologetics argument for the existence of God somewhere on YouTube, there's a pretty good damn chance, a very good chance, that I have already watched that video and rejected it. Okay? It's not that I don't necessarily want to interact with some of these arguments. It's just don't waste my time with something that I've already considered. I keep looking for some new argument for God, and so far, Nothing. It's the same tired old stuff. Argument from morality, the teleological argument, argument from design, you know, cosmological argument, Plum's cosmology. It's all the same. I've seen it all. Okay. The other thing you have to deal with is I have other explanations other than supernatural and divine that I've now read about since I haven't been a theist. And holy crap, that stuff makes a lot more sense to me. And it's a naturalistic explanation. You have to get past that. Okay. You have to get past the fact that I am unconvinced that there is a God. The burden of proof is on you. Please give me something that I haven't seen before. Give me something that it doesn't involve personal experience, because personal experience doesn't prove anything. It just proves you had an experience and you interpreted it a certain way. Doesn't mean that that's true. Comment of the day. I've had a lot of good comments that I could have chose from. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to pick one here. Cole Mellinger out of my Atheist, Human Rights, and Christian Rights video. The first thing I want to say about that video, I got a lot of comments on it. There's like 6 or 7 of them that are really good, like really solid. I did this in response to Vinny Rack. My whole point with that video is just to get everybody to think. What is the basis of rights? How do we obey rights? So on and so forth. But Cole Mellinger here says, it's ironic that many people think the foundations of the nation are Christian. Even if some of the founding fathers were Christian, they borrowed ideas from the Enlightenment and twisted scripture to get what they wanted. Founders such as Samuel Adams cited Acts 5:29 to obey God rather than man in some circumstances, to which anybody could use this to declare rebellion when they did not agree with the authority. Also, many of the founding fathers who identified as Christian were convenient Christians, which meant that they were part of a traditional state churches in mainline denominations such as the Anglican Episcopal Church in Virginia and the Congregational Church in Massachusetts. It was only during the Second Great Awakening in the early 19th century when more people became radically religious in the country after the late 18th century, with groups such as the Methodists, the Baptists leading the way. Ironically, these groups have so much influence in the country that they not only identify the founders as Christians, but Christians who are like them, which is heartbreaking to me as a historian. Only when we teach the true history of our country, as well as the world history, can we truly identify and deal with the problems with religion becoming a public affair. I want to let you know I couldn't agree with that statement much more. The thing about the founding of the nation is it was founded as a secular nation. The whole point the founders were trying to do with their Constitution was to get away from the church and the state being the same thing under the same umbrella. They wanted to get rid of the church out of it. Let's have the state over here. Let's have everybody, if you want a religion, go ahead, worship whatever you want, but keep it out of the government. And it was a truly unique nation. I don't think any nation had done that before. Maybe they had, but I'm just not aware. But this was the first time that somebody said, let's just make a government that serves all the people, regardless of religion, regardless of whatever. Let's just make a government that works. Now, did they make something perfect? No. Did they make something, better than anything else before it? Yeah, I think they did. I think they showed what I would call political genius. They certainly had some understanding of politics and philosophy of government that most people never came to. I mean, these people were sitting down and discussing and arguing very strongly, and both sides would have good arguments, okay, about how the government should be based on reason. And I am very well aware that it was Charles Finney that really got the country thinking Christian, and that was after the founders. The original Constitution was criticized by every religious group. I mean, a lot of the states, they had their own state religion for the state. I think, the Quakers were the state religion of Pennsylvania. I think Massachusetts had, they still had the holdouts from the Pilgrims and stuff like that. when the country was being put together, Connecticut and Rhode Island had initial disagreements of what religion they should be in, so on and so forth. And it's been that way for a long time. Well, when the Constitution comes along and says we're just not going to have a state religion, it kind of forced all the other states eventually to follow suit, that they couldn't, we're not going to discriminate or say anything based on religion. You're free to follow your religion. It's just keep it out of the state. And it really was Charles Finney and Andrew Jackson and some of those other guys that followed that kind of, pandered to the religiosity of people and put religious back on the map. It's funny because I think if my math is right, it's fuzzy, like the first 5 or 6 presidents were not very religious at all. One might argue George Washington, but I think you're right. I think George Washington was more a Christian of convenience, or a Christian and very critical of his faith, because George Washington was indeed very critical of Christianity. He went after it a couple of times. So, but I have, my main book recommendation for this subject that's very well researched is Andrew Seidel's The Founding Myth. It's a great book. It is well documented. He takes his lawyer's mind and he builds the case against each claim that Christians say, like, we were founded as a Christian nation. He debunks that. George Washington prayed at Valley Forge. It's a famous painting, hangs up somewhere in the government. It's probably not true. George Washington wasn't the kind of guy to just pray. He'd go to church and come back to his stuff, but he was not a praying man, as far as we know. There's a lot of things that were propagandized after the founders died and their mythology around them grew. And I'm very well aware of that. But once again, The Founding Myth, Andrew Seidel, great book. We want to talk about, because he makes the case against Christian nationalism. And I'm going to be blunt, it's probably one of the pretty heavily researched books I've seen in a long time. I mean, you open it up and there's all these footnotes. And when you get to the back, you're looking through the footnotes and it's like 2 pages of footnotes for every chapter minimum. So he's well documented, and we're talking original sources. He's like going back to the original documents that these people wrote to make the case. So, a lot of different mythologies about that, and he kind of debunks them. That's a good one to read. And thank you for the comment. I appreciate that, Cole. Like I said, there's a lot of other good comments. Hopefully I responded to everybody. If I didn't, that's great. But once again, challenge for Christians, come to understand your country a little bit better. And thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Hopefully someday I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, also known as the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.